Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today is a very important day. Let me introduce myself. My name is Jesus Rodriguez-Espinoza. I'm the editor and founder of Orinoco Tribune, a Chavista and imperialist news outlet in English based in Caracas, Venezuela. Tomorrow we're going to have very important presidential elections in Venezuela, and for that reason, we decided to organize this session of questions and answers. First, to let you know my take on the elections, my forecast, how we in Orinoco Tribune see what has been happening, what it is actually happening right now, and what might happen tomorrow. So for that reason, we decided to share with you this. And after a presentation, a small presentation with some ideas that I draw about the elections, I will be more than welcome to answer your questions, that you can put it in the chat, in the YouTube live stream chat. Right now, I don't see those questions, but I'm gonna go there immediately after I finish my initial presentation. So I'm gonna go there without no further ado. Um, so, and as I know that many people watch this live stream afterwards, I will, or join the live streams a little bit later. I believe that it was important to, at the beginning, make this brief about our take on the elections. So to begin, I wanted to talk about the background of the elections, the electoral dynamic in Venezuela in recent years. And what I just wanted to highlight in this part is that these elections are not too different from the elections that President Chavez and Capriles Radonsky had in 2012, I believe. 2012. The last presidential elections that Hugo Chavez won. I mean, the opposition was united among one candidate, which was Enrique Capriles. And there were other small electoral candidates very similar to what we have in these elections. So in terms of political configuration of actors, there's not too much difference. The only difference in this case is that the candidate is not Hugo Chavez, but President Maduro. So that's the only difference. I'm telling you this because mainstream media, the Washington constructed narrative is that these elections are historical because for the first time the opposition is united, between quotations, and Maria Corina Machado became all of the sudden the new sweetheart of Venezuelan, which is an absolutely big lie. And I just want you to let you know, I just want to let you know that narrative is tricky, is not accurate. So I believe that that's something important to say. Of course, the opposition have, after several years, I believe that since 2000, what, 2030, since 2000, after those elections, when Hugo Chavez win in 2012, and then President Maduro won in 2013. After those elections, the opposition had the victory, the parliamentary victory in the 2015 elections. and they were united, and they did a tricky campaign, taking advantage of the mourning of many Venezuelans after Hugo Chavez passed, and they won the the elections, the parliamentary elections in 2015, and everyone in the Chavismo recognized that victory. We didn't like it, but they won. So we have to respect that. And that will take me to some other, issues, narratives that mainstream media has been trying to position uh, in recent days. But let me keep with that idea. I mean, after 2015, the opposition began, I believe, that mostly because of U.S. Washington pressures to fracture more evidently, more visibly, and uh, and uh, and I don't know how to say, they follow the electoral abstention path. They promote violence with guarimbas in 2014. That was before the parliamentary elections, but also with crazy guarimbas in 2017 that took us very close to civil war here. Those were terrible months in 2017 of street violence promoted by the opposition. Uh, and since then, they were lost. And the only difference in these elections is that after those crazy years from 2015 until today, they managed to organize uh, uh, primary elections last year. And I'm going to talk about that later. But I just wanted to highlight this, historical electoral, moments, just to give you an idea of what happened before and what is happening right now. So, so now I'm going to talk about the opposition strategy. Here, the opposition has been talking during the whole campaign about the government advantages, the unfairness of the board, and that's something that they usually they do in all the elections, and I believe that first that it is a big exaggeration. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. I mean, the government has tools. Chavismo has tools because it's in government to 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 do certain things that maybe the opposition people cannot do. But the opposition exaggerate though that imbalance, and they don't never talk about the humongous imbalance that is behind the U.S. blockade and the U.S. sanctions against Venezuela and against President Maduro and most of the Chavista high-ranked officials. So, I mean, there's a bounty, a reward by the U.S. Department of Justice against President Maduro and several high-ranked Chavistas. Uh, they are offering, like, I believe that is $10 or $15 million for someone that helped capture President Maduro. So you can imagine how unbalanced that is. Not to mention the crazy, terrible effects of the economic sanctions against Venezuela and how that affect some Chavistas that might feel overwhelmed by the economic crisis that we had like until 2 or 3 years ago. So they never talk about those things in news pieces, or neither. Of course, the opposition never want to talk about that, but at least the press journalists should mention that humongous balance that is way bigger than some advantages that the PSUV, the ruling party, might have, because it is the ruling party. I mean, so anyway, I just wanted to highlight that, which I believe is important. They have been talking about the opposition has been talking since day one, especially Maria Corina Machado, about the not recognition of the electoral authorities in Venezuela. Maria Corina Machado is the most important opposition activist in history that has opposed recognizing the CNN. And it is amazing that she is right now recognizing that between quotations again, because she is actually not, she said, but behind her, there are several other political right-wing actors that promote every day the unreliability. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. I mean, they are constructing doubt about the quality of the electoral system of Venezuela, promoting the idea of fraud, something that never has been proven, because all electoral experts in Venezuela and from abroad that have checked the capacity of our electoral system say that we have one of the best electoral systems in the world. And that's fishy, because that I believe that that plays against the opposition, because promoting doubts about the electoral authority increases the chances of abstention, of people not going to vote, because they might think, what I'm going to do voting if the CNE is Chavista. You know what I mean? So for that reason, I believe that even that crazy strategy that they are promoting only play against them. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that fact, because it is there. Mhm. Another important thing that I believe is associated to the opposition strategy is what I call that they play demencia. I mean, they talk about, they call for democracy and respect of the institutions and everything, while they still support the interim government of Juan Guaido. Guaido is not there anymore, but the interim government figure is still alive. And that's an extremely important thing, because that figure that is still supported by the US government, seized the gold that was robbed by the Bank of England, finance opposition parties and opposition leaders in Venezuela, and they keep they rob Citgo Corporation, which is a humongous big oil refining and retailing network in the US, and belong to Venezuela, to PDVSA, and they seize it, and they are about to dismantle it, because that's the business. That's how the US is gonna charge for all the things that they has been doing to get rid of Maduro and help the opposition. So it's that's what I call playing dementia, because they talk about democracy and they talk about it, respect to the institutions, but they are still supporting the interim government fake project, and a failed project. It has failed. It has shown that has failed, and that's why Juan Guaido is not there anymore. But they have another people that another woman that replaced Juan Guaido, and and that institution that they created is still there. Another important thing that I want to talk about is the opposition of the opposition candidate contradictions, because we have 10 electoral candidates, one of Chavismo, which is Maduro, and another one, 9 others that belongs to opposition groups, different kind of oppositions because the opposition represented by Maria Corina Machado and his surrogate candidate Edmundo Gonzalez is the far-right opposition. It's one of several oppositions as we see it here in Venezuela. We call them the oppositions. And there has been, not in recent days, because I believe that doesn't play in favor of them, but a few weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago, there was a big fight between people that supported Maria Corina Machado and another candidate that have a lot of popular support, which is El Conde. Benjamin Rousseau is his name, and we call him here because he was a humor, I mean, like a standing comedy, a comedian, El Conde. And they were attacking him because they were saying that he was going to subtract votes from hardcore right-wingers, and that would affect the chances of Maria Corina Machado via Edmundo Gonzalez to win the elections. And that happened with other, maybe one or two more opposition candidates of those groups that do not belong to the far right opposition. But at the same time, that played a crazy contradiction, that infighting between opposition candidates promoted by the far right, a contradiction in terms of the narrative that they has been promoting during the whole campaign, which is that President Maduro was going to cancel the elections, that President Maduro was going to cancel the cards. We call it the cards because they are in the voting ballot, like these small cards where you select. So they were saying that President Maduro was going to cancel the unitary platform party card, and that was going to force them to move their support to another candidates from the other 8 opposition candidates that are out there. So that was a crazy contradiction that was happening a few weeks ago, but that ended like 10 days, last week, like 7 days ago, when the deadline for changing of candidates was reached. So right now, there's no chance for canceling any card. There's no chance for switching support from one candidate that might quit towards another. Those possibilities that are allowed by the Venezuelan electoral law ended last week when the electoral schedule defined that day as the deadline for those changes. So we are right now not talking about that, but that was a big contradiction that happened until last week. Another important thing that I believe I have to tell you is that the confrontation between Vente Venezuela, I mean, the unitary platform is a weird political party because it actually is a coalition of parties. In that coalition, you have people from UNT, that is one party, Un Nuevo Tiempo, Acción Democrática, Voluntad Popular, A Popular Will, and Primero Justicia, Justice First. Those are the 4 parties that form the far-right alliance. Between those parties, there's a lot of confrontation, especially between UNT and people from Voluntad Popular and Primero Justicia. So there has been a lot of issues that have transpired to Venezuelan public opinion about the confrontations between those parties to organize themselves with electoral witnesses. That is something very important that happened in Venezuela. Every electoral poll has to have electoral witnesses from all parties that want to have them. And that's a key issue because here in Venezuela, because parties want to have presence in every electoral pole, and we are talking that in Venezuela we have, according to something that I read recently, like 30,000 electoral polls in 15,000 electoral centers. That gives an average of 2 electoral polls. We call them tables in for each voting center. Most of the voting centers in Venezuela are located in schools, like 99% of them. So, and everyone in Venezuela know where he or she is going to vote, because that's something that you can check very easily in the website of the Venezuelan Electoral Council. Just put in your ID number. So anyway, I just wanted to highlight that there's, I mean, there are issues, organizational issues within the far right party, the Plataforma Unitaria, in terms of organization for tomorrow. So that I believe that will play bad for them, and it's not. I mean, and if you compare the level of organization that they have and internal frictions that they have among them, and you compare it with the PSUV is a monster in organization and has been learned over the last, I don't know, 15 years to improve his voting strength. We call it maquinaria electoral in Spanish, electoral machinery. I don't know if that translates well to English. But anyway, so that's basically the most important things that I believe that I have to highlight about the opposition strategy. There are certain narratives that they promote, but I'm going to talk about that later. And they have been promoting for months, and some of them in recent days. But now I want to talk about the Chavista strategy. The Chavista strategy has been very unusual, especially in the way the rallies around the country happen. The whole, even the opposition strategy for rallies was also very weird, because you didn't have the opposition candidate, which is a very old and in bad health conditions, Edmundo González. And the one that was running the country was Maria Corina Machado, most of the time with a poster of Edmundo González, which is something pretty weird. And also, Pachavista also did something similar, at least until the campaign began, like 3 weeks ago. I mean, Chavista forces were rallying the country since, I believe that since June, no, before June, since April, very close to when the date of the election began, was announced, and they began informally, because it was not the formal presidential campaign, but they began rallying, but Maduro was not there. In many of those initial demonstrations, Maduro was not there, and those rallies were performed by Jorge Rodriguez, Diosdado Cabello, Delcy Rodriguez, I mean, top Venezuelan PSUV leaders. And in some cases, it was Maduro also, but Maduro was more active in these formal campaign days, and he moved all around the country. I believe that the number that I saw was that he said that he visited 30, I mean 330 towns and municipalities in Venezuela in 3 weeks. So that says a lot, but I also have to highlight that all those things, and I believe that part of the lack of presence of Maduro in the first stages of the campaign was the threat against the life of Maduro. I want to repeat to those that were not at the beginning that right now I'm not reading the questions, but I'm going to read the questions when I finish talking. I know that there were 2 or 3 questions before the live stream began, so I'm going to begin with them. But please write your questions as I talk. If you don't understand something that I say and you want me to clarify something, just put it in the chat of the YouTube live stream, and I will uh, I will be very happy to clarify anything or to answer questions or whatever. Uh, Another important thing, I mean, and those threats against the life of President Maduro has been there and has been documented. People has been put in jail because of those threats. I'm not talking about last year or previous years threats against the life of Maduro. I'm talking about this year. So it's important to highlight that because Maduro, for example, one of the strategy of the PSUV was not announcing where Maduro was going to be because of security concerns. So what basically happened during this campaign is that Maduro shows up in certain cities just out of the blue with very small preparation beforehand because they are trying to protect the life of President Maduro. And that's one of the other things that you can take into consideration when talking about, who has the advantage and who is the one that is like being affected by the other political group, Another important thing, the PCUD approximately the fact that the PUD cannot only call for an invasion. I mean, I believe that the PSUV in this campaign did not explode enough the fact that I mentioned before, that the far-right groups uh, are the ones that has been calling for foreign invasions and sanctions, and are the ones that are currently illegally controlling Citgo, the goal of Venezuela in the UK that the Bank of England robbed, the illegal National Assembly that is still robbing assets that belong to all Venezuelans. They receive payments in dollars by the U.S. government. I mean, I'm not inventing these things. I mean, these are documented facts, and especially those three things that I mentioned about Citgo, the gold, and the supporting of the illegal National Assembly that is still operating from abroad, uh, has not been enough exploited by the PSUV campaign, if you ask me. The electoral process is another thing that I wanted to talk about, from the opposition primaries until the registration of candidates. A lot of media talk about that Maria Corina is the new leader, the new sweetheart in Venezuela. I mean, Maria Corina Machado is not a sweetheart of anyone. Is not a newcomer neither. She has been in politics for years and has been I don't know how to say, like extreme far right opponent of Chavismo, of Hugo Chavez, and now of President Maduro. And what I wanted to talk, what I want to let you know is that the media talk a lot about the opposition primaries in Venezuela that were held in October last year, 2023. But the opposition primaries were a fraud, if you ask me. I mean, it was a construction. I'm not saying that Maria Corina Machado that did a lot of work with all the money that she has, because she belongs to the Venezuelan oligarchy. It's important to highlight that. She created this idea that she was the predestined leader of the opposition, but what happened is that she runs an NGO called Sumate, and that NGO was the one that run the primaries. So that's why a lot of the other candidates that participate in those far-right opposition primaries last year complain about the results. I'm not saying that she might not have won, but what I'm saying is that she allegedly won like with 92% of the votes, which is pretty weird, especially taking into consideration that the guy that was in second place was from the Democratic Party. Um, Democratic Action Party. Um, he actually, a few days ago, declared himself independent and announced his support to President Maduro. I don't recall his name right now, but that party, Democratic Action, they have, after the PSUV, they have the biggest electoral machinery in Venezuela. And that guy only received like 1% or less than 1% of the vote and was in second place. And then they, as they usually do when they have organized their crazy votings and things that they do outside the electoral council, they burn all the minutes, electoral minutes, all the voting books, everything. They burn everything. And they of course, there is no way anymore to audit the results of those primaries. So I believe that it was a fraud. I'm pretty sure that Maria Corina Machado was going to win. But despite that, they manipulated the numbers. Of course, that's another thing. They thought that initially they thought that they were like 2 million votes, something that I believe is not true. And actually, in recent weeks, they have been talking that in those primaries, like 2.7 or 2.8 million Venezuelans voted. There has been increasing like 100,000 voters every month since then. And most of the analysts say that in the best case scenario, the way they conducted those primaries only could have allowed to vote, in the best case, 1 million people. But anyway, I just want you to give you context because not too many people talk about this right now. Another problem that I believe that complicated the election, in my point of view, was the registration of candidates. I mean, the presidential candidate has a deadline to register that. I believe that it ended in the 25th or the 26th of March of this year, if I remember right. And of course, Maria Corina Machado has been politically disqualified, and she know it, and everyone in Venezuela knew it since 2015, when she accepted a role of temporary representative of Panama in the OIS for something against Venezuela that was being cooked in the OIS at that time. And that immediately forced the government to expel her as a deputy from the National Assembly. She was then a deputy, but the Venezuelan law forbid that any legislator accept to work for foreign governments first, and then to have another role, another work. So she was expelled, and there was when her political disqualification began. And that forbid her to enroll as a candidate, even though she tried to use something that was agreed within the Barbados Agreement, that is that Venezuelan authorities, within the framework of the Barbados Agreement, that is this negotiation sponsored by the US and other countries to try to promote political reconciliation in Venezuela, they agreed that all far-right political candidates that were disqualified could how do you say that in English? Could file a case in the Supreme Court to see if they can reconsider their disqualifications. And in the case of Maria Corina Machado, her disqualification was not lifted. And it is a lie that the mainstream media spread around there that the Venezuelan government agreed to lift the disqualification of Maria Corina Machado. What the Venezuelan government agreed was that the that the Supreme Court was going to evaluate its disqualifications to study if they were able to lift those disqualifications. And like 3 or 4 far-right politicians and political disqualifications were lifted then. But Maria Corina Machado was not among those ones. And that force for Maria Corina Machado, like the day before the deadline for the registration of candidates was forced to Maria Corina Machado and the far-right unitary platform to name Corina Lloris, I believe that was his name, an unknown person that is, of course, supported, a far-right supporter, and a very old woman also, which is something strange in the people that the opposition has been selecting, especially in the case of Venezuela, that is full of young people. Uh, anyway, and 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 they did a very, I don't know how to label it, but interesting move of selecting Colina Lloris at the last minute. And when they tried to register, there was something that was not very clear, in my opinion, that it was controversial because no one explaining very clearly, no one in the opposition and no one within Chavismo. But the fact is that Corina Lloris was not able to register. And in the last minute, they decided to choose Edmundo Gonzalez, which was part of the far-right opposition machinery. He worked in the international relations, whatever committee they had. So at the last minute, they choose him, and that's why he is right now the candidate. A very unusual candidate that is in a very bad health conditions that have not rallied the country. So that's basically, I believe that those are the most important things around the elections. I just want to mention some narrative that the opposition has been trying to impose in the last month. Uh, I'm talking about the narrative of the transition. They talk about the transition and the change, and that the change is coming, that the transition is coming. And they have been using that a lot. And it's like, I mean, it's not, in my opinion, I mean, I don't know how to label it, but I believe that it's not an effective approach towards it because this is not something new that they have talking about. But anyway, that's the strategy, the narrative that they have been imposing. Uh, uh, Another narrative is they complained a few months ago about the witnesses. They say that the witnesses from political parties in the voting polls, uh, uh, there was a decision by the CNE, the Venezuelan National Electoral Council, that any witness in every voting poll should at least be enrolled in that voting center. And that, in my opinion, is something that is not new. I was Consul General of Venezuela in Chicago for several years, and we conducted in the consulate elections from Venezuelans that live abroad. And in one of the conditions, the conditions that we had for the opposition witnesses that participated in those elections that we organized in the consulate were that they have to, we could not accept an electoral witness from Miami in the jurisdiction of Chicago because Miami was not part of the states that we covered in the US. So that's something that is not new, but they made a lot of noise saying that that was one of the new arbitraries of Chavismo. And I just want to highlight that, most of those crazy narratives that they have been trying to impose, especially in mainstream, against Chavismo and talking about political unbalance or whatever, unfair elections or whatever, most of the time are lies or exaggerations. So that is one of them. The cancellation of the elections is something that I mentioned before, but they have spent the whole, we have been hearing in Venezuela the whole year about the something that they say that Maduro is going to cancel the election at any moment. Chavismo have never canceled an election. But they talk about that because they wanted to create this level of, I don't know, the anxiety, or I don't know how to call it. But anyway, meanwhile, when they impose those narratives, they hide those threats against President Maduro's life that were uncovered at the beginning of the year, and the public ministry put people in jail because of that. They do not talk about sabotages that has been unveiled, and that has been happening against the electricity grid in Venezuela in recent months, and one important one that happened in the Angostura Bridge, where authorities discovered that some of those humongous wire that sustain bridges were cut, intentionally cut. The opposition was trying to put a doubt on the Venezuelan government, the nouns of this sabotage, saying that those wires were cut because of lack of maintenance or whatever. But the Venezuelan government took photos of the places where the wires were cut, and it was clear that they were cut with what those big machines that cut wires. I forgot how you call them in English. But anyway, that's another narrative that he has been trying to impose. The abuse of power and intimidation against Maria Corina Machado. The whole year we have been hearing how bad the government is because they put controls in the highways against Maria Corina Machado's caravan, that the Senat attacks businesses that support her, that 20 Venezuela activists are poor guys that has been threatened by the government, when in reality most of them are just sabotagers and criminals. The checkpoints affecting Maria Corina Machado, attacks, intimidation. The most recent one was a very bad stage false positive, false flag operation that Maria Corina Machado tried to make it look like an attempt against her life. She basically, a few days ago, spread the news around the world because she tweeted it with a video saying that like the government was threatening her and her team, and she shows a couple of SUVs painted with some signs and with some brake cables cut and without oil, one of them. And it was proven some person already was detained that belonged to Venezuela, that admitted, that confessed that he was the one that did that. And a lot of people immediately, Maria Corina Machado has in Venezuela, she has a history of false flag operations. It's something not new. And immediately after she spread that video, people began to complain about some houses that were in front of in the street where the cars were parked, and houses had video surveillance cameras, and people were wondering, why didn't you ask the owners of those houses to share with you the video footage to see what happened? Of course, there's no answer against those questions. Then some people began to explain that neighborhood in Barquisimeto is a very for rich people, for people with money, and they have security at the entrance. It's a fence neighborhood, and they have security and cameras everywhere. And there was neither any evidence or video showing how the bad Chavistas painted those SUVs. So it's fake after fake. They are used to do that. That's part of the way they behave. It's not new. But they promote that idea that the government and Chavismo is something bad. And they are the poor guys that are just the victim of Chavismo. So they have been promoting this narrative in recent months, and most of it, I'm not saying that there might be abuses or some scratches of people disgusted by their presence, Chavistas, I mean. But besides small scratches or confrontations against her, that most of the time are not violence, most of these allegations, these narratives are just lies. Another important thing is the word of polls. I mean, the opposition has been showing crazy polls from crazy poll firms saying that Edmundo Gonzalez has like 30% of advantage towards President Maduro, something that is very weird, that not a single Venezuelan, even opposition people really believe that those polls are true. But from the other side, Chavismo has been playing the same trick, which I believe is not good. I mean, Chavismo has been showing also other polls, sometimes from new polling firms that no one knows, showing that Maduro have like 30 also percent of advance. So is this in that particular sense, this election has been unusual because both parties has been playing this poll war that I believe is unnecessary. But I believe that it's important to highlight that Interlaces, in my opinion, is one of the most accurate polling firms in Venezuela. It is associated to Chavismo, I have to say. But if you check their projections before elections and the real results of each elections, in some comparison that I did a few years ago, that was the polling firm that most accurately represented projections with reality. That's at least my opinion, and it's not a crazy opinion, but I imagine I compare numbers then. And Interenlaces has been showing that President Maduro have an advantage of 20 points and 50 or 15 points against Edmundo Gonzalez, and I believe that that's pretty accurate. But I'm going to talk about my expectations for tomorrow's numbers at the end of the conversation. But another important polling firm in Venezuela that is associated to opposition is Data Analysis. Data Analysis is run by Luis Vicente Leon, which is an opposition activist. And in recent years, they have been not showing figures because they say that they want their clients to have those figures, and that they have implemented controls to avoid leaks of their polling numbers because that's the business. That's the explanation that they give. But recently, there was an alleged leak of a data analysis poll showing that Maduro was going to win like by 3%. But that analysis traditionally has been biased towards opposition. So in my opinion, that 5% might easily become 15%, if you ask me. But remember that we're talking right now about the polls. Francisco Rodriguez, another far-right opposition economist based in New York, make a good analysis a few days ago talking about how biased the opposition poll firms are. And he built like an statistical model in which he somehow neutralize that bias. And after that, the numbers were in favor of Maduro, not by a big margin. I believe that it was like 2 or 3% of advantages of Nicolás Maduro, taking into consideration all the poll numbers corrected by their bias. So it was an interesting analysis, but that I suggest you to check if you can. Francisco Rodriguez is the name of that opposition economist. Another important thing that people do not talk too much about is the abstention. I mean, there are 21 million Venezuelan registered to vote, 21 million. Opposition and expert talks that maybe 3 million of them that are eligible to vote might be abroad right now, and they, of course, are counted as being in Venezuela. And I mean, they are part of those 21 million voters. and they might not be able to vote because they are abroad and they have been moved recently. So some experts talk about that you have to subtract 3 million of those Venezuelans from the 21 million base of electors in Venezuela. You have to subtract around 3 million from voters that are abroad. But you also have to subtract like like uh like 20% of Venezuelans that traditionally don't vote, that they don't like to vote. So we're talking about 2 or 3 more million of Venezuelans. Uh, Also, you have to subtract 2 million of people that might be voting for the other opposition party candidates. So when you add up all the numbers, you see that when you subtract 3 and 3 and 2, that means 8. And you take those 8 out of the 21 million, we are talking about what? Like 13, 13 million people that might be the ones that are gonna vote either for Chavismo or for the opposition. And Chavismo can easily move 6 million people. And I believe that those are the numbers that you have to take into consideration when analyzing the turnout numbers. I believe that the turnout will be somewhere between, in the best case scenario, around 70% in the best case, between 65 and 70% in the best case scenario. And a lot of experts say that the bigger the abstention, the more chances Chavismo has. I'm not sure if that's correct because most of those analysts are from the opposition, but that maybe they are right. Voting abroad and not voting in the U.S. is another story that people talk a lot, trying to complain about Venezuelan authorities. I mean, all Venezuelans that are abroad can vote. Of course, in the U.S., there was no chance to vote because with Venezuela don't have diplomatic relations because with the U.S. since 2019, I believe, or 20, because of the Guaido crazy project and the blockade and the sanctions and everything, and 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 that will affect them, of course. But that's not you cannot blame the government, the Venezuelan government for that. I mean, that's a decision that was taken by the U.S. government that actually invaded our embassy in Washington, D.C. So I believe that I've been talking too much, but I want to talk about all these things because I believe that they are important. Now I'm going to switch to the live stream chat to see if there are other questions. Please feel free to write questions in the chat. Let me write something there, but I'm gonna read the first questions that were reading before the chat. So thank you for being there, Compass. I'm gonna read a question by Sahili. She asked, can you explain why the opposition primary was unacceptable? I don't know how this thing is organizing. Give me a second. I'm gonna try to keep the questions in order. See why it's not showing me that. Okay, I'm gonna try to, for some reason, I don't see the previous questions that Sahili wrote in the, but anyway, I'm gonna read, please, Sahili, and the other guy that, there was another guy that wrote a question before the live stream, but I don't see it. I don't know why YouTube is hiding those questions. Feel free to put the questions in the chat, guys. I'm gonna read what the YouTube chat is showing me. Can you talk about the Anti-Guarimba Pact? Yes, I believe that that's an important question. I mean, and I forgot to mention that the mainstream media, Washington has been promoting in recent days this idea that President Maduro is not going to recognize the results of the election, something that is very weird and doesn't have any sense because the government and the CNE, the electoral authority in Venezuela, a few weeks ago, called for the signing of an agreement that we call anti-Guarimba agreement, which was basically a pact among all the candidates, an agreement that the CNE asked all the candidates to sign to recognize the election, not recognize it blindly, but to recognize at the first moment elections and to avoid violence. That pact was promoted by the government, by the CNE, and was signed by 8 of the 10 candidates. The only candidate that did not sign that pact was Edmundo Gonzalez, the far-right candidate, and another important far-right candidate, which is Marquez, Enrique Marquez, I believe that is the other one. So that question is very important because it reminds me to talk about that crazy narrative that the mainstream media, Washington, and the opposition has tried to promote in recent days. That crazy idea that Maduro is not going to recognize the results, when in reality has been the opposite, what has been happening. Uh, uh, Another narrative that I forgot to mention is that crazy narrative about the fraud. I mean, the government and the opposition has been, in the mainstream media, has been trying to create the idea that there's a possibility of fraud in the electoral system, and there is no possibility of fraud in the Venezuelan electoral system. Every expert, even opposition experts, say it. International experts, Venezuelan experts. I mean, it doesn't make sense. But they have been trying to promote that narrative because, and that's something that scares me, there's a chance that people are going to use that as an excuse to call for violence. And the government has been denouncing that a lot lately. Sahili wrote, CNA doesn't steal elections unlike the Mexican one. Vicente Fox, who stole an election for Felipe Calderón, tried to enter Venezuela to try fraud. Yes, we posted a piece about that crazy move that we knew was going to happen. And actually today, I believe that another group, yesterday, this group of Latin American former far-right presidents wanted to do one of these media stunts and that they usually do. The Venezuelan government is already vaccinated against that. And basically what the Venezuelan government did was to call the airline, the carrier, and let them know that they could not allow to board those far-right former presidents that wanted to come, including Fox, Moscoso, another former president from Costa Rica, I believe that I don't recall his name, the former vice president of Colombia, a lot of far-right people that wanted to come to Venezuela to do those media shows that they are used to do in other places. I mean, Venezuela, they won't be able to do that anymore. Here I have a question from, and today there was a group of Spanish parliamentarians that wanted to do the same, and they were rejected entry to Venezuela. So that's part of the plan of the opposition. But Venezuela and authorities already know about them. This is something that Ronald Agus, a good friend from Canada, uh, uh, he just said that it's a great initiative. Thank you, Arnold. Sahili, can you explain why the opposition primary, that's something that wrote Sahili. She asked, can you explain why the opposition primary was unacceptable for not being held under the auspices of the CNE? There is a case of usurpation of electoral authority, right? I mean, the opposition primaries are the right of, primaries are the right of opposition party or any parties. And this, according to Venezuelan law, uh, uh, the at least from what I have read, uh, um, in every party is free to do organize their primaries by themselves, but the CNE, our electoral authority, has the roles, the legal role of helping organize primaries in any political party. But of course, those parties have to request the assistance to the CNE. And what happened in the opposition primaries of last October is that at the beginning, the opposition requested the CNE for assistance, but then at the last minute they changed their mind and they decided to run the elections using Sumate, something that I already explained. So, and I already talked. I believe that I explained myself when I talk about the opposition primaries. I believe that they were a fraud. I already say that. I believe the opinion poll scene is part of the fraud narrative. Yes, yes, of course. And that one of polls saying that Edmundo Gonzalez is winning by crazy advantages is replicated by far right, by mainstream media, and of course, it's gonna be used to argument the fraud that I'm pretty sure that is gonna be announced when President Maduro wins election tomorrow. I mean. But anyway, let's see what happened. Francisco Rodriguez say opposition overestimate opposition vote in the polls. Yes, I mentioned it already. And he did a good analysis. And there is an interesting piece from CEPR, which is a think tank in the US that was published yesterday or before yesterday about that work that Francisco Rodriguez did. I didn't like too much the piece, but the information that they have there about Francisco Rodriguez work trying to somehow clarify what really those opposition poll figures means was a good work. Saheli wrote, I put the turnout at 40 and 45. I believe that I mentioned that I don't think that it's going to be that low, but because I feel that a lot of people in Venezuela are excited from both sides about the elections. I believe that 65 might be an optimistic turnout. That is the one that I mentioned before. Let's see what happens. But as I explained, and there's a lot of people outside Venezuela, and that affect the turnout numbers. Vicente Fox, Mireya Moscoso, Manuel Temponi, a good friend of us from Chicago, writes, Vicente Fox, Mireya Moscoso, and other former presidents tried to enter Venezuela. Yes, I just mentioned that. Yes, they didn't have invitations. They were not really observers. They just was friends. They are just friends of Maria Corina Machado that wanted to do a media show here in Venezuela, but the Venezuelan government already know how to deal with that kind of people. Yes, I mean, I already talked about that. I believe that you might already have read what I said about it, Manuel, and thank you for your question. I've seen a lot of, this is from someone called Battle Cossack. I've seen a lot of people bringing up the minimum wages in Venezuela as proof that socialism has failed. Can you debunk that? I mean, a lot of people, especially right-wingers and some extreme left people, like the people from the old Communist Party of Venezuela, has been saying that the deterioration of wages and salaries in Venezuela is a premeditated decision by President Maduro. And they put out of the context the extreme, unheard of in any time in Venezuelan history, harsh, terrible conditions that we faced between 2015 and 2020, 21. Especially since 2018 until 2021, the wages of Venezuelans went to hell because of the hyperinflation mostly. but Venezuela. But before that, Chavismo historically tried to improve the minimum wage of Venezuelans, and people don't talk too much about that. Of course, because that doesn't help their narrative. But since Chavismo took power, Venezuela, at least until 2011, 2012, was among the countries in Latin America with the highest minimum wage. I remember that because that was part of my work when I was Consul General of Venezuela in Chicago, and we have to present figures about Venezuela and what was happening in Venezuela, and I remember that very clearly. Since 2011 or 2012, those figures began to decrease because of Hugo Chavez illness, because of uh, problems with the prices of oil. In 2013, the GDP of Venezuela began to go down. Uh, and as part of something that we call the economic warfare, that was the preamble, the beginning of what happened later with the sanctions. But anyway, I believe that is important to 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 say that because the government has been very clear that it is among the ones that hate the crazy situation of wages in Venezuela. And it's true that a lot of the weight of the crisis has been put in the shoulders of Venezuelan workers. And that have to be corrected, and the government has recognized that. Uh, so what I'm trying to say here is that uh, it's not part of the policies of Chavismo to deteriorate the salaries of Venezuela. It's something that has been imposed as that, and I'm pretty sure that if President Maduro wins the elections tomorrow, and the economic recovery in the U.S. didn't intensify its aggressions against Venezuela, we will see sooner than later, a recovery in the salaries, and that actually has been happening. Uh, uh, and there are I've been reading some stories of people showing that besides what is the nominal minimum wage of Venezuelans, I mean and the government has been improving, not in the best way possible, but in the best way the government can afford. The government has been improving those salaries with bonuses that it pays every month. So I believe that currently the minimum wage is around $140, which is nothing if you compare it with other Latin American countries, not to mention other countries around the world, but that is way better than what you hear in many of the mainstream media talking about the minimum wage being at $3 or $5 or something like that, which is like a half truth or less than half truth, because that minimum wage is compensated with other bonuses that the government has been paying in recent years, and that currently put the level of the minimum wage somewhere, I believe, around $140 a month. Which is nothing, because I mean the basic basket of food, according to some experts, right wingers, sadly, is in Venezuela is close to $500. I mean the cost of things that you need to relatively live well in Venezuela. So what it says is that you need at least like 3 people working at home to have. But Venezuela has been learning to to deal with that. Venezuelans have been learning to solve this crisis of wages, and and that affect mostly public employees, working for the government, for the ministries, for the mayor's office, governor offices. And even in those cases, that people has been learning how to make a living outside their traditional work, which is not optimal, but it's something. I mean, people have been learning to build things, to cook something, to resell something. I mean, there are a lot of gifts out there that Venezuela has been doing to try to solve the crisis, and that has helped us survive in recent years. And the economic situation in Venezuela, is something that I forgot to say, has been improving a lot in recent years. So let me try to refresh the the chat, because I believe that for some reason YouTube, at least from my side, is not showing everything. Well, I believe that these are the questions. There are like two other questions that people wrote before the chat began, but I don't see them here. And I was from Sahili. I believe that Sahili, one of the questions was, how was the mood of the people in Venezuela? And I believe that is important to talk about that, because you don't read it. I mean, there's no tension. I don't feel tension in Venezuela. There's like a lot of expectation, like high expectations in that you feel in the atmosphere. Uh, and that's not only something that belongs to Chavismo. I believe that is general atmosphere of high expectations that you feel between among Chavistas, but also among right wingers. I believe that it's terrible that they has been promoting this idea of uh, uh, like an unquestionable victory of Edmundo Gonzalez. And I believe that's terrible, because I've seen people really thinking that, really believing that Edmundo Gonzalez is going to win. And that's going to be terrible when tomorrow uh, at night, I believe that it will happen somewhere around 11 p.m. at night, the CNN announced that what I hope that is, and what I expect that is, that President Maduro is going to win. And with this, I want to close the presentation, because I've been here already for 13 more additional minutes. But I just want to say that my expectation is that Maduro is going to win tomorrow. Is that I believe that it's going to be a tight election. I believe that President Maduro is going to win with a margin of 5%, maybe. Uh, and that's complicated, because if it is less than 5%, the opposition is going to feel encouraged, more encouraged, to promote violence, to promote this narrative of fraud, and do what they are experts in doing, which is soft violence, and reinitiate the Guaidó project cycle now, with Maria Corina Machado at the helm. And that's terrible. And that's something that have to also to be said, which is that if they win, they are going to need all the money that the U.S. government sent them to remain alive. So keeping the interim government fiction and the interim president fiction will be extremely helpful for the opposition if they lose elections tomorrow, as I expect is going to happen. And that's why it's so important, something that President Maduro has been saying a lot of time in recent weeks, which is that after the electoral results are announced, if he wins, he's going to call for a national political uh, encounter to try to solve the political issues uh, between Chavismo and the opposition. So that's something that I believe is important to be said. Un abrazo, compas. Thank you, Saheli, for being there. I forgot the other question of this follower that we have in Discord. He put like two good questions, but I don't know why YouTube is boycotting me, and I don't see his questions here. I hope that I answered them in my speech. Un abrazo, compas. And let me tell you the last thing. I decided yesterday that we in Orinoco Tribune are going to have a live stream tomorrow, starting at 4 p.m. We don't have the resources. We don't have the technical capabilities to do an amazing, very beautiful live stream, but I believe that it's extremely important to have someone on a live stream reporting in English from Venezuela, and that's why I decided yesterday to do that. So I invited a lot of journalists and international observers out in Venezuela to join us and help us tomorrow participating in the live stream, providing information about what they see on the ground, while me at 4 p.m. after voting and covering some electoral centers in Caracas, come back home, and from here, from my place, from our headquarters in Caracas, which is my home, do this live stream, trying to provide you information. I know we don't have a lot of speakers, but I hope that some of these friends that I mentioned, you journalists and international observers, could join us tomorrow and help us, comment and have a conversation about the electoral process, the election day, until the results are announced. And I hope that will happen at 11 p.m. tomorrow night. So I hope to see you tomorrow. Please follow us in our social media. I'm going to post right now, after this live stream, the information, the link to the live stream for tomorrow. And I hope you can join us tomorrow, and please help us spread the word, because I believe that a lot of people just are like in the dark, especially progressive, socialist, anti-imperialist people abroad, outside Venezuela. Most of them are in the dark, not knowing exactly what is happening here. And the idea of the live stream tomorrow is to try to solve that problem. Un abrazo, compas, and I hope that you enjoy the conversation, and I hope that I answer your questions. Venceremos. Bye bye, compas.